Hey, what's up, cash flowers? Matthew Pillmore here. Welcome back to another video here on the VIP Financial Ed YouTube channel. I'm president of VIP Financial Education, and we're here to show you how to go further, faster financially. I've got a special guest on the channel with me here today. Scott Ulmer's with me again. We're going to be talking about a $100,000 off-market deal that he recently just did. He's going to be spelling it out, going through all the meat and potatoes on the dry erase board. So we're going to get right into the fun stuff here. Before we do, I just want to make you guys aware that this is going to describe a business model that is a blueprint for success, you could call it. Very much a franchise-esque type of model. It's an affiliate partnership with the company, with Scott, and they're going to show you guys how they've been taking people to wild levels of success. And we all know that there are really two ways of maximizing cash flow. You've either got to make more money or spend less money. And we talk about the restrictions with spending less money. Nobody wants to cut back on lifestyle. So really it boils down to some of the creative ways of paying your debts off more quickly. We go through a lot of that on videos here on the channel. Make sure you check those out. But even with that, there's a maximum best case scenario. There's a maximum upside potential to it. And those of us here at VIP don't really like those restrictions. We like to figure out ways of making more money, which has unlimited potential without the restriction. And for that reason, we're always scouring for new ways of generating new income streams and diversifying the ways that we generate money. And with that, we stumbled into this business model, which is a wholesale or lease option owned model. And it's been very, very successful for the past 3 years. We've talked a lot about it on the channel. I'll leave links in the description below. Make sure you check those out. Also, write down this email address, pink like the color, at vipfinancialeducation.com will be where you'll want to send your first name, last name, contact phone number, and put conversation in the subject line if you're interested in finding out whether or not this is a model that might work for you. It is not a model that will work for everybody. And there is a cost involved, folks. If you want to buy a franchise that's already successful, that has a roadmap that you can just simply follow along and generate success also, it's going to cost you money. However, the cool thing about this model is that we found ways of getting people involved without much, if anything, out of their own pocket. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the video today too, so make sure you stick around. I don't want to do any more rambling. I'm going to hand it over to Scott. Scott Ulmer, welcome back to the channel. I'm very, very curious. Obviously was poking at you to get you to come on and share a little bit about this deal that you did, producing $100K. And we all know that Jacksonville happens to be one of the hottest markets right now in the entire country. So what this seems to prove to me is that deals can still be done anywhere if you know what you're doing, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And thank you for having me back. Honored to be here.
Awesome. Happy to have you. All right. So tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so to your point, Matthew, Jacksonville got named the second hottest market in the country, and this happened about 5 or 6 years ago, and we originally said, oh, this is great, we're the second hottest market in the country, and we started high-fiving and realized, well, why is this great? It's going to create more competition, make the deals harder to come by, and so this was in 2015. We really never waned on our inventory. We were able to consistently keep what we were shooting for at that point, which is about 30 houses under contract at all times. We had to make a few more phone calls. Certainly there was a little bit of extra work involved, but we were able to find those deals. Well, fast forward the tape to 2022. We're in a post-COVID world. The market has changed. And we've pivoted accordingly and have found some really great deals. Well, I kind of did this exercise last week and really started with no leads and really no contacts, if you will. Now we've got some contacts out there, but these were distinctly different properties that we had been targeting, that we had from the past. Our typical modus operandi is using contracts to secure our interest in properties. We deal with a lot of pretty properties and have a lease option program that is really designed to create homeowners, something we're proud of. It's really the foundation of our company. But a lot of my past is buying kind of bank-owned properties and making kind of multiple offers. We talked about that in a prior video where we're making a cash offer and a terms offer. Well, where do you start with the cash buys? And in a market like this where you have limited supply, there's obviously economic factors all over the country that state clearly the supply is clearly down and limited, which makes it harder to find deals. There's also, I was watching the news a week or two ago, and during the nightly news, there were 3 commercials, 3 in a 30-minute window for people buying houses. One of them was Opendoor, and then I think 2 were local ones. So, well, most people can't compete with the big boys when you're spending that kind of money. So where do you start with the leads, and how do you ultimately find deals when you've got guys spending tens of thousands of dollars? In fact, I talked to a home investor, We Buy House franchise guy a week or two ago. He said they're spending about 15 grand a month to generate leads. Most investors looking for deals will start dropping mail and text blasts and getting lists and pre-foreclosures. And there's so many different ways to kind of go about finding those leads. But again, all that costs money. And again, when you're competing against these big boys that are spending tens of thousands, how far are you going to get with those campaigns? Now, I don't want to discourage those because there's merit to them and they ultimately can uncover good deals. But your $1,500 to $3,500 kind of an average cost per lead when you're dropping mail and doing some of these traditional ways of uncovering these types of distressed properties, if you will. So what I did is had a couple things that I think are really important to share, because keeping in mind we're in the #2 hottest market in the country, I spent not $1 on any marketing and was able to uncover really 3 deals by the time of this filming within a 7-day window. One of the 3 I'm going to share in a minute was one of the top 10 best deals I've ever done in my 26 years. So, and how I found it, I think is going to be of interest. So a couple quick things I'd like to just share. First and foremost, I had to have dedicated time. We have a business here, and that obviously can take a lot of my time. When I'm spending an hour here or 2 hours there, it never really took enough traction. We never got enough of the traction that I was looking for. And so I started off with having some dedicated time blocks where I took really 2 or 3 days of nothing else on my plate, but really laser focused. I think that's really important to just kind of really block everything else out and spend the time. But what I did next is what uncovered these deals. I went and I found every wholesaler, every We Buy House person I could find in town here, got a list of them. I got a list of all the auctioneers and all the auctions that were around here in the surrounding area. I then got access to the MLS, which is very easy to do. Most people know a realtor and they can get you access to MLS where they put you on a scraper type function where it pulls the properties you look for. So I had that and was targeting more of the distressed bank-owned properties. But from that, Matthew, it shows a lot of who the REO or real estate owned agents are. Agents specialize in dealing with bank foreclosed properties. Now, there was a moratorium for a long time, as we all know, through COVID, and so foreclosures are kind of slowly starting to trickle in, and pre-foreclosures, we're seeing more of those as well, but there are agents that really focus on distressed properties. So here I've got this list of people that are in the deal-making business and have leads that they're cultivating by their own means, and I reached out to them. And one of the things I said to the wholesalers, which I think is going to be my first big takeaway, is I called them, said, look, I'm an investor. I buy houses. I can pay cash. I can also make a terms offer. In many cases, we'll make multiple offers. Would like to get on your list for potential deals that you run across. And ultimately, if you have ever run across a deal that you don't want to close or that isn't the right fit for you, or you're kind of at your fill for the month, if you want to assign that to me, I might have an interest. Well, literally 3 of the wholesalers I talked to had leads that they hadn't either closed on, were considering selling, didn't know if they wanted to close on them, and ultimately got some really good deals from that. And then, of course, went through the list of the people I just named, the auctioneers, the auctions, the REO agents, and then through that, you just start shaking the trees, and I uncovered some really, really good deals. Again, one of the top 10 best deals I've done in my whole life just by kind of shaking the trees there. So I don't want to continue to ramble, but that was really that kind of blueprint, if you will, just kind of bare bones, grassroots, making phone calls, just finding out who the players are in the community that are working with these types of leads and making the introduction and shaking the trees, and some really good stuff fell out.
That's awesome. And I'd really like for you to get in and just illustrate the deal for us. But before you do that, I just want clarity on this lead generation process. For somebody that's getting involved with the business model, let's say somebody wants to pay to play, they become an affiliate. Are these types of techniques something that are a part of the training? I know you guys have always been known to have a ton of support. Everybody we've ever brought on the channel for the last 3 years who's participated with Pink has done a phenomenal job of explaining that the support is second to none. Is this all part of that training? So somebody that's from scratch, let's say I don't even know what an REO is. If I'm coming in green, is this something that I'm handed as part of the package?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's part of our training, and with scripts, with the makeup of the lists, and really the A to Z, along with all the other training that we already provide, which is really the gamut of real estate. So yeah, this is we're constantly updating it. I find myself spending time every month before our trainings, really updating the most current information, the most current lead generating things we're doing, scripts that we tweak and revise. Yeah, all of that is always up to date for that month's training. And again, I thank you for making that comment about the past couple of years and the support that we've given. It's something that we really pride ourselves on. You know, you're not on an island out there, and that's kind of crazy. And even last week when I was kind of doing this exercise, trying to put myself in the shoes of an affiliate starting really from scratch without support, it can be lonely. It can be a challenge getting started, and certainly there's a lot of questions. So yeah, part of our big come from is giving that support and holding the hand, you know, from A to Z, and all of this will be part of our training.
Great. Now you mentioned something as far as offering multi options here. You mentioned a cash deal. You mentioned coming up with terms. Most people coming into this are not going to have, you know, a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 slush fund to play with and be able to start making cash deals. I'm hoping you get into this in the illustration here. How do you, for somebody that's just getting started, bridge the gap of being able to come up with alternative options, buyer options, when you're approaching sources of leads like that? Is this something like private money?
It is, and I would say that I guess as far as formulating offers and ultimately putting a multiple offer, our kind of platform and really our come from has always been what we call non-traditional real estate, working with terms where a buyer or seller will make payments toward the purchase, seller would receive payments toward the purchase, and again, that's kind of out of the scope of what would be traditional. Traditional arm's length sale is a willing buyer selling to a willing seller, fair market value, no distress, just kind of a normal transaction. Ours would be outside of that scope and what was the non-traditional world. So, and to this day, there's the gurus out there, a guy named Ron LeGrand, who I still keep in close contact with, is just convinced that the terms business is where it's at for a lot of reasons, and much more so than wholesaling and even cash offers. And so the knowledge of what to look for in a deal, and certainly what to say, and ultimately how to structure those non-traditional deals, those are going to be around forever. Good markets, bad markets, easy credit, hard credit, seller's market, buyer's market, those deals always exist. Now, they're a little harder to come by in certain phases right now with values continue to go up. Some of the deals that are non-traditional are a little harder to come by. We've got different targets that we have been going after recently, but ultimately having that knowledge is really, really paramount for any deal you run across. Also the ability to write multiple offers. And so what we find is that people like options. They like to have choices. So when you can structure a deal where they would receive payments, typically it's at a much higher price because the value of the cash today doesn't have to be put on the table. So we're willing to pay more. And I find people have a tough time with that, understanding that you can afford to pay more if you don't have to pay it today. And that's something that in the terms world we train and ultimately will structure our offers accordingly. When it comes to cash, it's kind of the cart and the horse. And this is something that we talk about often because it's usually one of the initial or preliminary hurdles that people have in their mind. How can I go make a cash offer if I don't have the cash? Well, that's a pretty fair question. But I learned a long time ago, if you have a deal, and this is what we teach our people, if you run across a deal, make the offer, you will find the cash. And if there's a deal, you'll find the cash. And frankly, the deal is the hard part. Once you get the deal, the cash is a lot easier. But directly answer your question, Matthew, it is private money. What most people think when it comes to private money is that they're asking for money. They're begging. They're kind of putting people in this uncomfortable position. And in reality, it's the opposite. There's a safe, secured, collateralized, conservative position that every private lender would get. I can almost guarantee you they're going to make a lot more lending than they would in a savings account or in a CD or something that's conservative. And so with the right approach, the right script, and ultimately the right way to structure the deals, there's people in everybody's circle right now that they could find that have money that could be a potential lender. Again, with the right approach and ultimately how to structure it, people should feel good about that. But again, the natural is, gosh, I don't like that. I don't want to ask for money. And so one of the things we do teach is not only how to identify really 3 to 5 people in your circle today, but what to say to them. And one of the things about us, and you know this from from work with us, Matthew, we're not hard sells. That's not our style. We have a soft approach. This isn't for everybody. Whatever we're proposing, it's either, for you or not, and that's okay if it's not. So it's the same thing when we're approaching private lenders. If we run across a great opportunity, we think it can be a win-win situation for us, for them, and ultimately for the buyer that we're going to create through the process. And so it's not as daunting as people may make it out to be, but ultimately private lending is the key to finding some really, really great opportunities. And when you're going to find a property that's distressed, the way to kind of get the ability to have a deal that has big equity, that you can create additional value and equity by putting improvements into it, typically it comes when it's physically distressed. And you usually can only get those, for the most part, when you're making cash offers. The real big discounts is usually going to require a cash offer.
And we realized that, which is one of the big reasons that we recently partnered up with a private money lender. So for those of you that are getting involved with the Pink Houses model, and you do that by emailing pink@vipfinancialeducation.com, put your first name, your last name, your contact information, of course, and conversation in the subject line, and get going, because we can set you up with a private money lender that can team up with the Pink Houses guys, and you guys actually can have the power of being an all-cash buyer. So that's very exciting, something we've been working on for a very long time, and it finally came together. So very cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the whiteboard here. Scott, show us this $100,000 deal. I'm pumped.
Yes. All right. Yeah, me too. This is great. So let me just kind of set the stage. So again, shaking the trees. I'm following auctions, and I can tell you this. Where I'm from, I guess prior to Florida, we did a lot of auctions. Auctions were very prevalent. Down here being in Florida, they don't seem to be as prevalent, and I think that can play to people's benefit if it's not something that people are following very closely. So this property that I found on Natalie Drive was actually up for auction and then had been canceled. And as I kind of researched some of the history of it just online, this might have just been on Zillow, but I know the website was a site called Hubzu, Hubzu, Hubzu. It's a national auction platform, and they have obviously local auctions that they put out there. Well, this had been on and off 2 or 3 times. Thought that was interesting, and so I did a little research. Ultimately, I found the listing agent, who was not the auctioneer. She had ultimately referred it to the auctioneer. So I called her, and I introduced myself, and I said I noticed she had this house it was up for auction, off on, and ultimately kind of what's going on with it. Furthermore, do you run across other types of properties like this? Because I'm interested in anything that you may run across going forward, looking to establish a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. We kind of connected off the bat. Here's kind of the long story. So this house here was going into foreclosure right at the outset of COVID. And so behind in payments, and ultimately the lender had sent an appraiser over to the house. Unbeknownst to the seller or the owner-occupant, the appraiser had COVID and didn't disclose it to them. I don't know this to be a fact, Matthew, but the way it was sounded was that the wife, she ended up passing away from COVID here, and it sounded like she got it from the appraiser, and no one said that. That's just kind of the way it sounded. But ultimately, COVID hits. They're in foreclosure. She gets sick, ultimately passes. At the same time, she was a hoarder. So in between foreclosure, ultimately the moratorium, COVID, she gets sick. I don't know if she got sick right away, but ultimately people would come through in showings, and then when they would look at the house, it was full of clutter. It's hard for people to see past the clutter when they're trying to look at a home potentially to buy. So, and then the wife passes. Now the husband is in mourning and grieving, and so he's changing his mind and not sure that he wants to sell. Doesn't really have a choice because the bank is foreclosing, 2 mortgages, moratorium lifted. There was a lot of back and forth, and turns out the agent just happened to be someone from his church, so she was kind of helping him out. Really didn't even expect a commission. Ultimately, we put one in there for her at my insistence, but this was a deal that we just kind of snuck up on. And so all of those factors, and she pulled it off the auction about 2 weeks ago because he changed his mind again and ultimately decided that, he does want to sell it, but. So I go out and look at it, and she kind of gives me the breakdown, and again, this is a right time, right place. And I will tell you this before I go to the board. I asked her, they had it listed on the website for a $355. It does need some basic cosmetics. I got to tell you, I don't know that we could find more than $20,000 to spend in this property, even if we really, really tried. One of the questions I always will ask whoever the seller is, agent, wholesaler, whoever that is bringing us the deal, I always want to pick their brains, and I find people can be somewhat apprehensive when it comes to that. If you're talking to somebody, wholesaler, agent, what does it need? How much do you think it's going to cost? And the question I always ask agents is, if I were to relist it, and I may relist it with you, what would you ultimately relist it at if we did this work that you're saying needs to be done? And she said she'd relist it at $450. So we've got a $353 or $355 price that's advertised online. With some work, she said she would take it back at $450. I said, that's great. I looked at some comps. I said, I'm not quite seeing the $450. Can you send me a market analysis at what you're seeing? So sure enough, that night she sent it over, had some really, really great comps, and defined what she would use and why, and and ultimately felt really, really confident in the value. And as I saw her comps, and certainly would rather start high and come down, but she felt really confident about the value. She also told me as we got into the conversation that if I were to come right to her and not have an agent that would ultimately need to participate in the commission, that she thinks $330 would ultimately get the deal done. So again, we're just talking, we're just having conversation. I'm just asking some questions, and again, with a soft approach and of course the right situation, she just kind of opened up the floodgates and shared all about the backdrop of the seller and kind of why it's at this point, and why it really wasn't even on the market at this time. So now I don't have any competition. And that's, again, a small takeaway I got towards the end of our conversation, that it wasn't on the auction block, it wasn't on MLS. You pull it up on Zillow, it says off market. So she pulled it off the auction, hadn't even put it back on. And when I started engaging with her, and we ultimately have an agreement, she didn't have a need to put it on there. So in spite of all the competition down here in Jacksonville, this one ultimately was considered off market for those reasons. And so let me just give you the real basic breakdown. So when I went and saw it the next morning, it was a great place, again, in great condition. I said to her, Anita, do you think if I were to come in around 310, I know you said 330 would take it, but do you think if I came in at 310 that your client would look favorably upon that? And let me pause real quick. Agents, many of them will play ball with you. Now, as an agent, you cannot come out and say, yes, if you submit 330, my client will take that. They've told me that. Or 310, whatever the number is. They can't come out and say that. They have a fiduciary. They have obviously their client's best interest, and they have to obviously honor that. But if you ask them certain questions that kind of tap dance around it, ultimately they're trying to get a sale as well. And so the question is, if I were to offer this, do you think it would be looked upon favorably by your client? Do you think your client would be inclined to accept this? I'm not asking you to give me the number. I'm just kind of playing a little bit of a tap dance game, and ultimately they'll give you, in most cases, kind of what the bottom line is. So I said, if I were to offer 310 and agree to pay the closing costs, and I'd like to pay you a commission as well. In fact, I insist on it, and I believed her, by the way, and in the contract she was not getting a commission. She was just helping this widow at this point. If I were to submit that, do you think that would work? And so we talked back and forth, and there's a second mortgage that would have to get discounted, but she really felt that would work. So $355 online. She tells me $330 will work if I come directly to her. I offer $310 in spite of that, and she says that I think they'll take that, and again, ultimately $320, and literally by the end of that day, she had the deal accepted. So she told me $330, still offered less, but ultimately got it accepted at $310. So we'll be in it at $320 as far as our acquisition is concerned, number one. Second is the rehab, and so it does need about 20 grand, and 20 grand will make this place just the top notch. It doesn't need much at all. We could sell it very quickly, which is going to be one of my exit strategies I'll share. But ultimately, if we put 20,000 into it, it would take our basis to about 340, and we figured we would borrow about 350 on the deal based on the loan to value, 450 ARV or after repair value, fully fixed up, ready to go. We feel very comfortable borrowing 350 on it. So having said that, that's kind of our basis. So if I look at the exit strategies, if we just do the $20,000, we take it out at $450, we stand to probably walk with somewhere around $430 after costs, we would make $90,000 on that, and that would be a straight flip. It'd be cash on cash. We would get our not only investment capital back, but obviously roll the profit into our bank account, go to the next deal. The second exit strategy is what I talked about on a prior video, which is called the work for equity, where we would do some of the work, but we would discount the price a little bit and let the buyer be the beneficiary of creating their own equity and adding their own value by doing the improvements to their satisfaction, to their liking. So we thought if we put $10,000 in the rehab, not 20, we would then drop it to $430 and ultimately give them the price break. And in that case, we would basically walk with about $100,000 on that deal, plus we would receive payments on top of that. And so we haven't decided which one we're going to do yet. We're probably going to end up doing the cash on cash just to get it and go to the next deal. That's a pretty healthy profit on one deal, and ultimately there's more of those out there. And so I will say one other thing, Matthew. One of the topics on a prior video, I talked about the word overfinance, and it's kind of analogous to, I know you guys do a lot on home equity lines of credit and how to utilize that for additional investment properties. If we borrow $350 on this deal, and we did a work for equity, so we're in it for $320. If we put 10 in rehab, we're in it for $330. And if we borrowed $350, we would put $20,000 in our pocket the day that we bought the house. And ultimately, we would do 10 in rehab and the buyer would take it for the long dollar. So we would actually pre-borrow some of our profits today, $20,000, and ultimately that would get paid back as our buyer makes payments and ultimately gets the mortgage in their name and lives happily ever after, as we hope. And so that overfinance is something that's really powerful. We can take that $20,000 and go put it as a down payment on another property, right? So it's utilizing the equity in the property today versus down the road with some sort of a line of credit. So ultimately, that's the deal. And again, it's whether we take cash on cash or some sort of a terms buyer, we'd expect a big down payment here. We would get payments on top of the price. And so the benefit in this is we make more money, but we just are typically delayed a little bit in getting the big payoff. So when you're staring at that kind of dollar figure for a quick flip, it's hard to say no to that. So we'll see what shakes out, but that's the deal.
Congratulations. That's awesome. You know, a lot of people are just convinced that the type of meat you're working with here on this bone is just not available. You're clearly proving that's not true. I think it matters who you're rubbing shoulders with. And of course, just keeping dialogue open. Having the right script means everything. And I think that's where the Little Pink Houses of America business model is extremely supportive for somebody that's a bit green at this process or is looking for a variety of ways. I know that you guys are continuing to pivot and you're adjusting your model based on the pandemic, based on various hot markets, based on changing times. And that's one of the things we've always respected the most about Pink is the fact that you guys never sit static and allow things to grow complacent. It's very much an adjustable business model, giving your affiliates the best opportunity at success. And that's why we have testimonial after testimonial. Still to this day, after three years and 3 months of inviting you guys back onto the channel to talk about the various details behind this business in a box, along with the testimonials that we're getting. I still to date have only 2 people who have ever expressed dissatisfaction, both who were readily willing to admit that they weren't putting in the time necessary to succeed. And I think that's a really important part. If you're trying to pre-screen yourself, one of the easiest and fastest ways to do that is to ask yourself if you're willing to work. If you're not going to put in the 10, 15, 20 plus hours each week, if you're not going to take this as seriously as you would at minimum a part-time job, then you're probably not cut out for it. This is a side hustle. And I usually like to consider these more important than the W-2 positions, more important than transactional revenues where you're not able to make the type of money that you could in a model like this, which for some is several $100,000. People are scaling these out. They're building teams. They're doing this through delegation. They're getting involved in multiple markets, and some are even doing it with geographical mobility. So there is a tremendous collection of perks and benefits that come with this model. So be prepared to work for it if you're going to do it. If you're not prepared to work for it, don't even bother emailing. If you are ready to work, send an email, pink@vipfinancialeducation.com. Again, like the color, pink@vipfinancialeducation.com. It requires first name, last name, and phone number. And I know that you guys have been running some various discounts for our audience, which is always appreciated. We certainly do appreciate that. You guys can certainly share price tags and so forth and what's going on when people reach out to you. But I know financing is available at this point where people can actually get in with little or no money out of their own pockets. So a lot of really exciting things. And I think that'll be accepted even as low as a 640 or 630 credit score at this point. So pretty flexible borrowing terms to get the package funded for you. And that is something that you can then pay back over time with the proceeds of the work that you're putting in and the results that you're getting. So Scott, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video. I don't want it to go too long. They can get more details from you guys by shooting over an email. Either you or Michael reach back out and answer any further questions on a case-by-case basis. But as always, I really appreciate you coming on and at least opening up to some of these secrets that you are learning, because I think this is a really great example of how you can still find things that the general public and all the competition out there aren't necessarily going to have first dibs at. So thank you again so much for bringing us this example.
Matthew, it's always a pleasure being on. Thank you for having us.
Yep, you bet, man. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Everybody, look forward to seeing you soon. And until then, keep on cash flowing. Take care.
Some names and where you're from.
Bobby and Jenny Witten. We're from Knoxville, Tennessee.
What's your previous real estate experience?
So we've got some buy and hold properties. We currently have about 7 units, and we've been in real estate investing for about a year now.
Fantastic. After the last 4 days, what's the biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway from us is this is something you don't have to do alone. The staff here is incredible. They're supportive, they're knowledgeable, they're friendly, professional. We don't feel like we're doing this alone. We feel like we've got a team behind us, and that's going to make all the difference.